Hi, I'm Emma Kotrovis, and I'm host of the Artists on the Verge podcast. And this is my conversation with the director and the producer of a short film I launched in 2020. To better navigate our conversation, see the table of contents in the description. Okay, I am here with Eve Tisler and Vivian Säde, the producer and director, respectively, of the potential film, very potential at this point film, Echo, which I launched in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And what we're going to talk about today is just how much goes into a project like this. Certainly, film has its own exigencies, but really every artistic project that you want to get off the ground and try to get off the ground, it's like an iceberg. There's just so much work that goes into it, and so much of it is uncelebrated because so many projects just don't find that special thing where it clicks at the right time with the right people. So do you want me, did one of you want to introduce just the Echo as the project, just so that we have like a general introduction, like the log line? What was our log line at the end?
Echo is an opera noir short film that delves into the artistry and fragile ego of a performer. Who is she without an audience?
Great.
Was the log
Yes,
line
that was
that
the
we
log
came
line.
up with.
And I think we did
Yes.
a great job with the log line, honestly, because it captures what we were trying to do. I guess I'll just say maybe in the beginning, before you two talk about like the process where it became kind of real, when it like became like an actual film that an actual dedicated producer and director were working on. I'll just talk about like everything that happened like in 2 minutes. I'll try to like condense all that happened, all the mishaps that happened before I met Vivian. So basically, I pitched it in 2020 to someone that I knew in the film industry because I do a lot of translating of film scripts. So I knew a producer who had given me film scripts to translate. And and this was at the beginning of the pandemic, because I think I had the idea vaguely of doing a film out of this very weird piece by Juliana and Caitlin Vincent for Unaccompanied Soprano before the pandemic. But then when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh my God, this is like the time to do it, actually, because there was this influx of video, like opera on video singers, doing poorly produced but very creative projects that involved, singing on video. So I was like, okay, this is actually the perfect time. And she said, well, this seems more like it's a short film. It seems more like something for a student. But so she called someone at FAMU, which is our film school. It's a fairly well-known film school. And a young director was recommended to me from Austria, who was studying in Prague, and he had just won an internal FAMU award for a documentary he made about a conductor, which is a really interesting like documentary about conducting. It had a lot of classical music in it. It was showing the performer, so there was an interesting connection there. And he was, and immediately, I wrote my own log line, kind of my own description. And generally I had, at that point, at the beginning of the pandemic, people were like, oh, this is a good idea. So basically that summer we did basically we did like half of it. We did a test shoot at a small theater with the sound person and the cinematography and everything. And then it started to stall because people, after we actually made the video, the test video, just to see how it worked on screen, because the whole idea was to do live singing, in these spaces, which is not how this kind of singing is supposed to work. And that was part of like what was experimental about it. But we found out that it actually works pretty well. You can even make cuts between scenes. That was something we were worried about. And, we were able to do that. But then when it came to actually like cutting it and processing the video and doing colorization and all that, it just stalled. So then the unofficial producer at that time, I approached him with this idea of getting a grant, because I was connected, long story short, I was connected with someone who does EU grants. This turned out to be a huge mistake. I will foreshadow and say this was a huge mistake to try to get an EU grant for this project, because I learned the hard way. when you try to get a big grant like that, they're going to try to transform your project into something totally different. So they didn't want to make a short film. They wanted to have an educational, first of all, they're dependent on whatever grants are available at the time. So they're
Yeah.
basically looking at the grants that are available and they're like, oh, maybe we can fit this square into this round hole. Maybe we can make this into something totally different and you can apply for this grant. So what happened was I was told maybe you can make this into an educational project where like people that are from film. I mean, that's how I eventually started pitching it, was people who are from the live theater could learn film skills. And my argument was that basically in today's world, you need these skills. And people in the theater need to learn like how to like work with film more, basically. So it was actually on paper, it sounded really good. And I spent hours and hours and hours like researching, I used research on like artists in the pandemic and like how video, and this kind of stuff to support my claim. I got very little help from the grant people because they get a percentage of your grant. But if once like they don't necessarily have that much incentive to help you beforehand because you're not paying them anything while you're working on the grant. And then the producer, after I had done all of this work for 2 months, he blocked the grant and he said, we're not going to turn it in because I don't know if we like, basically it came down to he was worried about getting money in through his production company because it would like mess up his finances or something. I mean, I got recommendations from someone at the local theater school. I did meeting, like I did so many things. As you know, you have to do so many things to accomplish like something so simple as just writing up a grant. So that was very dispiriting. And then I fired the producer. I wrote him a very, I was just really angry because I was like, you knew what I was doing from the beginning. You could have saved me so much work if you just said you don't want to do this. And I run up against this kind of behavior so often where people don't want to say no, but they also then just don't, when push comes to shove, they don't really want to say yes either. So I learned the hard way that this is something that's just the case when you're working with human beings. So then I contacted someone from Opera Wire, of all places, because I knew Opera Wire is owned or run by someone who is also an indie film producer. And he recommended in the United States because I was like, it's an American piece. And this is something we'll talk about. It's an American piece of music. Surely there is some support there might be some support for this in the US.
No.
And he referred me, foreshadowing again.
Yeah.
He referred me to some small opera companies, which wasn't really appropriate, but I was like, okay, let's see what small American opera companies have to say. And one of them was Bar Opera. And I remembered that I had interviewed Malena Dayan for... This is where you come into the story, Vivian, and where you can take over.
I just love Malena, that's all.
Malena is wonderful.
Every time her name gets mentioned, I'm like president of the fan club.
Yeah. And if anyone wants to know more about Malena, you can listen to my interview with her. I think it's like episode 4 or something of the podcast, Artist on the Verge. And so I was like, oh, so I know Malena, so that's a perfect reason, to contact her. And she was very nice. She met with me. I told her about the project. She said what she told us eventually again, which is that they don't have any they don't have money. That company, they raise money for specific projects. But she connected me with you, Vivian. And at that point, the director who I had been working on, who had shot the test shoot with me, stopped responding to emails altogether. I have no idea what happened to him.
Babe.
I don't know where he disappeared to. I know he was I checked he was studying in the UK. I don't know. So I was like, well, this is perfect. So Vivian seems like a perfect candidate. We hit it off when we talked about the project. And cue inspirational music for at that point it was still called Sentiment, the short film. So I've done a lot of talking. So now you can maybe take over from there a little bit, and I'll just interject. And actually, Eva, you come in actually even later than that. So you can kind of take us.
I can wait.
You can take us through like the very end, the finale.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Melina gets in touch with me and says that I have this Emma in this Czech Republic that wants to meet with you. And I was like, all right. Which is also funny because Emma in Estonian means mother.
Oh,
And I was like,
okay.
oh, mother, where are you? So anyway, we meet, we hit it off, and I take a look at the script with my co-writing partner Joe Caps.
Oh, that's right. I wrote a
Shout
script.
out
I
to
forgot
Joe.
about
He's
that.
wonderful. You did write a script, and it was a good script. It was a good script, but it felt like a script that was sort of like your thoughts on this adaptation to this like film. And we sort of looked at it and we were like, all right, we gotta perhaps make it more of a cohesive short film. We wrote one sort of edition of the script, one draft of the script. And then I was like, all right, so we can start involving some people in this now. And eventually I sort of figured out that if this EU thing is not going to happen, which at that point was still sort of like generally on the cards.
Yeah, right.
It
Because
was
I
like
was
we were,
hoping to maybe do it like next year, like postpone it. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, all right, let's see whether like we can work with like some Estonian grants or something. And then the Estonian Film Institute specifically called out an experimental film fund quite far in advance. And I was like, all right, excellent. So I had that in the back of my mind. But, you know, I'm mainly a writer director. I also would sort of generally call myself a co-producer of things. It just ends up that if you have these tiny creative projects, then you just end up producing regardless of whether you're officially a director or not. So now I'm a writer, I'm a director, and I'm a producer. And I was like, no, this is too much. This is too much for one person to handle. I cannot do this. And so the other thing in my brain was like, I need a producer for this project. Let's pin that. First, what I did was I went to the National Opera of Estonia Opera, National Opera House of Estonia, the main one, yellow building, can't miss it, big. And they were like, we love this project. We can't work with you in this sort of timeline because they had like a ballet festival and general renovations done to the actual opera house itself. And I was like, all right, then, okay, we got to go to the next one. Then we went to Vene Theater, which was the one that we ended up picking in the end, and they were very happy to work with us. They sort of made us an offer, and their like interior was all decorated in like Art Deco style, and it was absolutely beautiful. At that point, also, I onboarded Andres Arukask, who is the cinematographer that I do most of my projects with, if not all of my projects with. We've been sort of partners in crime for 5 years now. So it was very easy for me to go, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And then we sort of started working on a vision together. And so at that point, it's, I think, about November 2022. And I am at Black Nights Film Festival. And I am looking for a producer for one of my other projects as well. And I end up finding Eve in a database and seeing that she's at the festival and then being like, hi. It felt like the first day of kindergarten where it was just like, we sat down and like opposite each other. We were like, we will be friends now. Would you like to be friends? And it was a very formal, like, hello, I would like to work with you. Can we work together? And she was like, yeah. So I was like, okay, cool. I don't know. What was that experience like for you, being approached with like a basically fully formed project, Eva? I don't know whether you've had that happen
I
before.
guess our first meeting went well because I'm still here.
Do you have something to tell me later?
I'm just saying that it was kind of like one of those meetings where you don't really know what's going to happen, but in the moment you feel that, you know, the person sitting opposite of you, it's, you know, I like that person, and at that point we didn't know if it's going to work out professionally or not, but you know, we kind of hit it off with Vivian on a personal level.
There was
because we
vibes.
shared
Good vibes.
what
Good vibes.
yes
It's
good
all
vibes,
about the vibes.
the vibes, yeah. And that's something that like I really value in artistic work also, because you have to connect with people personally. You have to trust them as people first, and then you can move forward, and then you can, you know, do good work
Mhm.
together. I think that's been my
Yeah.
experience.
I think that was
And
I think that was the
Go
big
ahead.
mistake and the big lesson I learned along the way, Eva. It's very wise of you to know that, because every like bad encounter I can kind of trace back to that it was the lack of personal
mm,
connection.
Yeah.
yeah, but
I
yeah,
mean, it's
yes.
stomach, like you can feel it in your stomach.
Hmm.
Like there's so, I feel like a
Mm,
lot of us discount our intuition when we come into these business meetings, because regardless of who you're sitting opposite, there is a potential of a sort of collaboration, or you can get something from me, I can get something from you in the air. And if you forget that actually you need to enjoy this process and it's an artistic process, then it can get quite dicey quite quickly,
Hmm.
because you know our brains are really smart, and our bodies can tell when there's something that is a little bit wrong,
Hmm.
even on like a basic intuitional pheromone
Hmm.
like psychology level. Your subconscious can tell before you
Hmm.
can tell. And yeah, but anyway, that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
well,
this
yeah,
yeah,
but
reminds
yeah,
so
me
I think,
Echo.
yeah,
of that
yeah.
detour we had with the Czech producer, Vivian, because that was also a trip. Like, we forgot about that conveniently, but before Eva came on,
There's a reason.
like,
There's a reason we
there was
forgot.
that whole thing, which was more like I felt bad because that Zoom, I think at the same time that I contacted you, this was before I knew that we were going to be working together. I contacted this Czech producer. I had contacted so many production companies, little production companies in the Czech Republic. All of them are full, and they have too, and like they were even very nice about it and all that. And then he was the only one who didn't have anything going on, and that I was referred to, and who was willing, to talk to us, and actually spent like a lot like on the phone with me and then talking to us, and like, but it was very weird because like felt bad because he was like, so like I dragged you into a situation with this person that was incredibly dismissive towards you, like yeah,
Yeah, he was basically like, why this director? Why do we have to have an Estonian director anyway? And I was
yeah,
like, sir, I am on the project
yeah.
already. You gotta
And
deal with
like
me one way or
yeah,
another.
and
And
like
I'm
he was
trying
all
to get
about like
funds from
credentials and
Estonia
the
right now.
fact that you're young and this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was just, I mean, I guess it's testament to the fact that there's like these weird things that people who are producers asking for money from like the governmental funds have to think about. And in the Czech context, and
Yeah.
this is I have to say, to the great credit of the Estonians, in the Czech project, like in the Czech film funding, it's incredibly important to have an all Czech team. Like they don't want to fund anything that isn't mostly Czech, and that doesn't seem to be the case as much for Estonians. And so that's great. I mean, I have to say, after all this experience, I'm pretty like, I think the Estonians seem to be, at least in the film industry, seems to be much more open to the outside. Maybe because it's
I
smaller, I
mean,
don't know. But
I think you should move. Just move here.
Yeah,
I
you
can
Estonia.
help
should
you find an
Well,
apartment.
I
Just
think
come
it's
on over.
probably easier if you speak Estonian. I think that would be a big barrier.
It's cold, but it's
Yeah.
fine. Don't worry about it. We'll pump you full of vitamin
Yeah,
D.
I
It's gonna be
get
okay.
your point
Don't
though.
worry.
But I
Yeah.
wanted to say, oh yeah, but there was also this whole thing that he had with the female-led project that was weird
Yeah.
because it was like he was trying to
what?
help. Yeah. Well, oh,
No, no,
Eva,
no.
did you not
Not
hear
in
about
that
this?
way. There's
I don't
there's
know that.
Oh, okay.
I don't
there's
know that.
layers to this.
What
I'm
happened?
gonna defend him from only one single point of view, and then I'll stop.
Hmm.
So I've had many experiences where I'm defined as a female director, female filmmaker. In one way, if we look at the stats of even the Estonian Film Institute, do what you will, the percentage of feature films that have been awarded money that are directed by men are higher than ones by women. It's very hard to get your first feature film funded by the Estonian Film Institute if you're a woman. I just read this statistic recently, and
But
it's it's very difficult. But
Is
anyway,
there a
what I
disproportion
mean is
within between the number of like female like women directors applying and how many get the job?
no,
There
not at
there
all.
is a disproportion, you're
Um,
saying.
there's no. We pump out a very similar number of female directors as well as like male film
So it's
directors from the main film school.
50-50,
So
and
yeah,
then when it comes to the
yeah,
projects that get award, okay.
yeah. So there's probably more nuances to this. If somebody from the Estonian Film Institute is listening in, please enlighten me if I am wrong in any of these statistics. Um, but also the general sort of, I'm gonna use the word again, but vibes. Like I was on a film set that I was directing, a documentary set, and one of the like main characters of my documentary, that is like a side character, turns around to me and goes, "Wait, so how are you this young and a filmmaker? I thought that all directors were 40 and fat and balding."
Which
And
is
I
to
was like,
say
"I'm so
male.
sorry, I'm not any of those things." Well,
Yeah.
male, 40, fat, and balding. And he thought he was making such a joke, but then he kept on pestering, where he's just like, "How are you so young?" He also at some point called me Pippi Longstocking because I chose to like plait my hair
Oh.
that day. And I was like, wonderful. So it's stuff like this. So there's this general thing that's happening. And I think how the film industry is responding to this. I'm not even going to go to Hollywood, right? Hollywood is
Yeah.
like ridiculously sexist. But in Europe, it's just sort of like plaster solutions, where it's just like, all right, we're trying to empower these female voices. We're trying to empower minority filmmakers. And from a producer perspective, if you happen to have an all-female team, then in terms of the marketing of your movie, you can go towards those like female-led festivals and female content festivals. So when he was saying like,
The Czech
"Oh, can
producer
you
now.
get an
Yeah.
all-female," the Czech producer now, when he was saying, "Oh, can you get an all-female team, or is this an all-female team?" I would like to assume that he was looking at this from a marketing perspective of, can we market this thing as an all-female project?
For sure.
I don't know.
No, he
You could have
was. He was,
gotten
because
a
I've
different.
talked to
Yeah,
him
yeah,
about
could
that
be.
afterwards, also in Czech. I mean, it's also like we're dealing with several languages, so he's speaking English to you on
Yeah.
the Zoom. He can't really be as subtle. So whereas we also had conversations in Czech. So I mean, yeah, he was saying that, and he was basically saying, I'm worried, like, if this is it won't be a female project anymore if I'm the producer, he was saying. So I'm not sure if I'm the right producer. Are you sure you can't get an all-female team?
Yeah.
I mean, he also said stuff about how women tend to themselves kind of take themselves out of the play, out of the game, because of having children. Like he said he was on some panel where
Oh,
even a
wonderful.
woman said this about women, like about women in the industry, that she would love to do all female projects, but everyone, they're all having children and like willingly leaving the game. And I just don't, I
Yeah.
don't, it's not what I see. And I would believe statistics if that's the case, if someone did like but I do not see very many women truly taking themselves out of the game because they had kids. Like, I just don't see that. I know female
No.
conductors who nurse their child while conducting, like while during rehearsals, because they just want to make it work. That's what I see.
Yeah.
I don't see women taking themselves out. I think what it is maybe is that just it's such a cutthroat environment for everyone that anyone who has anything else going on is disadvantaged, basically.
Yeah.
I was
Including a
that's
child,
true.
including other things.
including
Yeah.
also, all sorts of things disadvantage you. So
Because it's easier to ignore your personal life and when you don't have children, but you can basically ignore your husband or a partner
Yeah.
and do your work instead. But when you have children, then it's a little bit different.
Everything is so much more complicated. It's ridiculous how we're talking about existing in the filmmaking space, and then we take it back to gender politics, because immediately everything relates back to gender politics if you at some point become enlightened to what's going on in that sort of way. But anyway, back to Echo. Because if we talk about this too much, then I just get sad, and nobody wants to get sad. Eve, what did you think? Because I thought of this question and I now just want to ask it. What did you think of this project? Not just like me, but the project when I presented this to you. Like, what was genuinely your thoughts?
Yeah, good question, because we started working on another project first, the series, and that was like kind of the reason that Vivian and I met at first place. And then she was like, "Oh, hey, we're gonna, develop this series, and also I have this short film project."
Mm-hmm.
So that was like, and that was more, the opera project was more concrete at the time because we had a deadline for the Estonian Film Institute. So that was
Mm-hmm.
like an easier project to approach as a producer, because I knew what I had to do. We had the steps we had to follow to get the funding application submitted to the Estonian Film Institute. So when I read the script, I liked it. I thought it was very inventive, and it was, yeah, of course, originally written by a female singer, and also all the aspects that Vivian was talking about, how she wanted to incorporate innovative sound technology and all that. That sounded really good to me. I thought that could be a really cool project. And also, I've never found any problems with jumping into a already kind of like a halfway into a project, because yeah, I just take the thing that is given to me, and I'm just gonna make it my own, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's as a producer, I see that is a very important skill, because you can't actually pick and choose all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pick and choose the script you're working with or the directors, and you would have to just decide if you're going to go for it with those conditions that you have. And then I decided to go for it.
Can you
Yeah, because sorry, go.
Yeah, I just wanted, just for the layman audience, can you just explain what a producer like actually does? Because there's a lot of confusion about that.
Who are you?
Yeah, yeah,
Who
yeah.
are you?
Who
What
are
are
you?
you
So yeah,
doing?
it is an interesting question, actually, because I've never been to producer school, if that such a thing
Yeah,
exists.
they have
No, not
production
really.
So
Kind of.
departments.
production there.
Well, yeah.
So when you study film, or I haven't also been to film school in a classical sense, because my background actually is in journalism
Mm.
and communications.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done also these kind of micro mini video projects as a, one woman show. You have to produce, you have to film it, you have to cut it, you have to, do everything. And also I worked in TV as a reporter on different TV shows, and all those aspects when you have to basically just get things done.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is producing for me, that you actually think about the actual project as a whole, and you take account the all the artistic aspects, and also the realistic aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
finances and
Yeah.
all that. So, and it really depends on the size of the project, I would say. Yeah, producing a feature film is so much different than producing a short film, or I don't know, music video or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't know anything about producing a feature film yet.
Yeah. You'll
Yeah.
learn.
Yet.
But yeah, but it's basically, it is yeah, it is I see producing as a overall management and leadership job.
Mm-hmm.
You would
Mm-hmm.
just have to basically be a team leader and get the team together to execute the project.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the project is sometimes film, sometimes it's a TV series, sometimes it's a short
Mm-hmm.
movie. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
I feel like filmmakers, like the directors and the writers and stuff, they see producers as like, give me money. That's the money person. This is the person who's gonna get me
Well,
money.
there is a
It
big,
often
I
is,
feel
yeah.
like, big misconception, I
Yeah.
feel like, because production companies, unless you're at the level where you're one of the biggest in the country or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, or unless you're in America, they don't actually have, or they have very little capital of
Right.
their own. Like, regardless of how big of a production company you are, you go to the Film Institute or the Cultural Endowment Fund and you fight for your life Hunger Games style, and you get your project funded through the government.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some commercial funds or sponsorships out there as well, but those are relatively new, I would say. So if you are a producer, then and a filmmaker approaches you, at least in the Baltics, as much as I understand it, in other smaller European states as well, you're not actually going to be able to, there you go, write you a check, let's go, for the entire project. You could potentially do it for like a tiny percentage of the project if you've been working for a while. But, well, for me personally, I know I'm a writer director, but I also sort of generally creative produce my projects, as I mentioned earlier as well. I did help Eva a lot with the sort of official producing of it. We did the financing applications and that stuff together. And my company technically has been like set up in 2017, so we've been technically operational for a little while now. This year is the first time that I've actually been able to pay myself a salary,
Wow.
like this year. So
That's
and this
impressive.
is when you take off all of the taxes and stuff. Like, well, not because it's only like a short while. I'm
Yeah.
going to be able to do it maybe until the end of like
Okay.
midsummer, and based on the stuff that's coming in and going right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards, I'm a free agent again.
Right.
So, you know, that's just a distinction that I feel like a lot of people who haven't been in the industry don't know, that producers don't actually have any money unless we're talking about the US. Then it's a different
Yeah.
situation.
But
Yeah,
they're
in
seen as
Europe,
vehicles for money.
usually,
Yeah,
yeah,
vehicles for
because
money,
the
sure.
producers usually have a different set of skills.
Yeah.
If the director or the screenwriter, they have the skill to think, create the project and have an artistic value in the project, and they can present it to the producer. Then the producer is the person kind of who takes the little precious artistic piece and then tries to find the funding for it. That is basically the skill set of a producer, that he or she would know how to get this specific project funded. Where are the different places to submit the applications? Who are the private sector funders, possible investors? And they would also think about where would the if I have, like, I don't know, the budget, and we will shoot the film and finish the film, then how would we present it to the outside world? How would we find the audience for it? What kind of festivals would we go to? What is the how would we present the project to the world? Because then also it becomes the question of money, like how many people would buy tickets to see this film. So this is the kind of mindset that producer has, and that's why I think the people who are really into the mindset of I'm just an artist, I don't want to think about money, or they would just think that, yeah, if I have this really good project, then it will kind of happen by itself, because everybody would want to see it, and all the producers in the world would want to produce it because it's just so good. The
Yeah.
truth of it is that there are hundreds or millions of that kind of projects everywhere.
Yeah.
And you would just
And
have to know, is it worth it? Because you would have to invest. Even the producers, even the producers would have to invest so much of their free time before it ever is gonna give back something. So it is always the question of, is it worth it to invest in it?
exactly. And I mean, that's, I think, why Eva and I work together quite well as well, is because I am very sort of organized. Feel free to jump in at any time and tell me that I'm completely BSing you. But I feel like at least I have a handle on spreadsheets. I'm quite organized. I kind of have a producer mindset. I can sort of turn that on and off. And that's just how my brain works. I very much want to take a project from infancy of like writing it and then hopefully directing it. But the thing is, producing comes before the directing even. It feels like I have to be in producer mode at the same time as writer mode if I realistically want to get something done as a quote unquote young first time filmmaker. It's so much more of a business and a numbers game than people realize. But anyway, I mean, in terms of the process, in January, we gave in our application. Shall we count how many things we had to get
You
for
mean
said
the application for the Experimental Film Fund for Echo?
Yes,
Yeah.
precisely. So we had to have a director's Bible notes thing, which ended up being multiple pages. What else did we have to have? We have to have a producer's commentary. We had to have a visual style Bible. We had to also include stuff on why this film is experimental. For us, that was because of a multitude of art forms being used, because of the sound we wanted to play with, and we tried to basically experiment whether this sort of opera singing and like opera filmmaking, well, opera singing and filmmaking could be made into something new that would enhance both art forms and make it better as the stuff that they did individually. That was basically our main thing. And then we also needed to have a commentary on exactly what we've been doing up till this point in terms of producing. And then we, of course, had to have the budget. And if we're talking about money, which I think more people should, our budget clocked in at around 40, I think, at the start.
40,000 euros.
Then 40,000.
You can just say it.
Yeah.
40,000 euros.
40,000 euros. And then I went to some people and they were like, that is very low. That is a very low budget for a short film. And I was like, excellent. All right, 60 grand. Let's go. Let's do it. And then I think the end portion was like 67 or something after we added everything together.
Yeah. This is, keep in mind, this is for a 10-minute film with pretty much one actor and some extras in a single location. With like, how many days did we want to film? We wanted to film for like 5 days at the most. 4 or 5 days, which would be cutting it close, I believe. But like,
oh, very much. So. If in an ideal world, we'd do at least 7 days for this sort of thing. And also it was 12 minutes. That's
12
distinctive.
Minutes. Okay, but
12 minutes.
Still, like 12 minutes, single location, 4 or 5 days of shooting, one main character. Like, it's just, I mean, it's like the most bare bones pretty much that you can get, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the main part of our budget was camera and lights. Yeah. And that's something that is going to have to be a rental. Yeah. Like, I think a very bare bones, but still good lighting package that we got was around 7,000 as like, through my cinematographer, he has some lighting connections, and that would have been like friend of a friend, blah blah blah. About 7,000, and around the same for camera equipment. Yeah, a little bit less, about 5. So that's already like, what is it, 1/6 or 1/4 of your project gone, depending on what you go for. And then you realize that in order to make something look visually extravagant, you need to have 12 to 15 people on set with you most days. And that is, again, very bare bones. Like, you can have film crews up to hundreds and hundreds of people. I was thinking, like, all right, do we really need an assistant for the costume department? Like, do we really need this? Do we need them to be there? So whereas normally in movies that you would have like 10, and I was debating on the one assistant. So yeah, it's an expensive business.
I would just comment on the budget that the amount was basically covering all of the process from pre-productions to the actual shooting and also the post-production. And we wanted to record the sound at the studio later, right? That was also in the budget. Yeah. And all the salaries was basically accounted for in the budget as well. Like, basically, I, as a producer, I was like kind of projecting how many hours I would work on this project, and then I would put my salary in the budget. So that was.
So that's if you want to actually pay
what was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be if you actually want to pay people some money for working working on it.
Which a
Yeah,
lot of
but
people just take
Yeah.
for granted that they won't. I mean, when I was like in the first team that I worked with, they were like, look, either you're going to pay them a full salary or you don't pay them anything. So we're just not going to pay anyone anything. Like, you got to just do
Hmm.
it we've just got to do it for no salaries. And that is an
Yeah.
attitude people have, you know?
Hmm.
So,
I mean, it's such an interesting workplace culture because it sometimes doesn't even feel like a workplace. But, there's so, God, like producing, honestly, can be a very thankless job because you can either kind of make it quite big or you can get nothing. Because
mm-hmm,
usually the producer and the like main people, creative people that are running it are the last ones to get paid.
mm-hmm,
Because we were both like, all right, we need to pay all of the people that are coming to work 12-hour days for us, even though we were going to do 10-hour days. We wanted to pay all of these people that are going to be there,
yeah,
and then mine as the cinematographers, the sound directors, and your salaries, Emma,
mm-hmm,
are going to be the last ones to get paid out.
yeah. And sort of based
mhm.
on,
And
well, I was going to say based
that is
on,
also something. Yeah,
Sorry,
we
well,
based on it. We took like a base salary of a like an Estonian average. It was, it was the numbers were good.
mm-hmm,
But I
yeah.
just wanted to mention about the thing where the producers get paid last on projects. That is also something I've noticed is different with producers who are female versus
Mm,
producers who are male, and that is also, I think, one of the reasons why women sometimes say it's hard to be in the film industry, because I've talked to one of the female producers in Estonia, and she was like, I think female producers are more willing to work for free on a
mm-hmm,
project,
mm,
and male producers, they will basically just get the money to pay it themselves, and then they will just produce a very low budget, low quality
mm-hmm.
project.
I would like to see if that's
So
actually,
these
yeah.
are, yeah, these are actually kind of two mindsets that I've seen in Estonian film industry.
Hmm.
lovely.
I mean, it would really
Love
be
it.
nice to get some
Right.
like numbers, like statistics on this, because I also don't want to just assume, just because all of us have certain experiences and assumptions about men and women, which are
Yeah.
based on experiences. I don't want
Yeah,
to
these
make,
are things. Yeah, these are things that are really hard to get
yeah,
statistics on, because they don't do statistics on those kinds of
they
things. But
don't,
it's
yeah,
it's like a common knowledge in industry.
Yeah.
People talk. They know
yeah,
which producers pay them and which don't, and
yeah,
it is a like yeah. Uh, I don't know. It's those kinds of mindsets, I hope, are changing,
yeah,
Hmm.
but it's also sometimes it's really, as an artist, as a director or a screenwriter, when you work on a project and then there is this big name producer
mm-hmm.
attached to it, you would just want to work with the producer, hoping that
It'll
they would
help,
give you the next job also. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that is also
yeah.
something that male producers are often taking advantage of,
Yeah,
I guess.
but that
It's
actually is
tough. It's so
interesting.
tough.
It's tough. I mean, it's interesting to note that, because I also think it's important to acknowledge the time, the age thing. So people who are older are more likely to be men, because lots of changes. It's easy to forget this, but lots of changes have happened
Hmm.
in the past 50, 60 years.
Mhm.
And so it's only natural that the people who have power in the industry are older, and they just tend to represent who was kind of allowed in at that time, who had who had a tendency to get into the industry at that time. So I think that
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
hopeful for the future. All these things, other things that you're talking about, notwithstanding. I
Mhm.
actually, it's interesting. Like, I translated something recently for a big Czech production company, like an actual, like one that actually produces like films that go international and stuff. For they collaborated with HBO and stuff, and they had a whole. They were also asking for a grant, and they had a whole section about how they are trying to change the way that they make movies in order to accommodate, especially people who have children. And
Hmm.
which is to say, also, I mean, they talked about female directors, and how female directors and producers and people in the industry have been pushing for a different way of producing that's a little bit more let's say, artist friendly, that's friendly to the needs of the artist, which should not be considered something that is at the expense of quality. And I think that there's this sort of weird
Mm-hmm.
cutthroat mentality that assumes that it's at the that if you take longer to make things, or if you accommodate, if you put childcare into the budget or something like that, that this and if you let people in who have such needs, that this is going to bring down the quality. But in fact, what it does is it just widens the pool of people that you can let in. Which, of course, I mean,
Yeah.
the flip side of that is more people in, more competition, and how many movies can
Mm-hmm.
actually get made. I mean, there's more movies being made today than ever before, and there's more series being made than ever before. But it's also an incredibly competitive environment in which there's just more people that are being educated in this field, in all artistic fields, than there are really space. Then there's real space in an industry real space that could like support them so that they can, like have an actual like stable career. I don't think that's really in the future of our
Yeah.
generation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is actually kind of going into the themes of Echo itself, which now fast forwarding to January. Well, January of this year. Was it this? Geez, was it
Yeah.
this year? It was this year, right? We're still in this year. All
It
right.
was February 1st. When you did
Yeah.
the so it was January this year.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Where one of the things that Echo was sort of talking about was this opera singer that has sort of depleted all of her own resources because she feels all of this anxiety and pressure to perform, and like she is killing herself to make this art. And to me, in the end, while I was writing my director's notes, was that I wanted it to feel like a cautionary tale of what could happen if you let your art overtake you in this manner. And when we went to the application, like the committee meeting, because how
Let's
it
just
works
say
is
we
that
were
you
one
send
of
in your
8 projects. Can
application.
we just say that we were one of 8 projects
Yeah,
selected?
yeah,
I think
yeah.
I cling to that as like the big success that we made it to this committee that actually talked to you for a while.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
sure. I mean, it could have also been that the rest of them were, projects written by mice or
My,
or somebody that was still in school, or I don't know. I don't know how
what did
many
you
of the
say?
people actually got commission
Yeah.
hearings. I don't know. I said mice. I was going for a Cinderella making a dress theme.
Yeah.
But anyway, it doesn't matter. That would have been very experimental, more representation for mice in the film
I mean, you
industry. Oh my
said
God,
that
it's
the
2023.
experimental film fund
Sorry.
attracts a lot of weird people. Like it like people come out of the
Yeah,
woodworks. Like what were you saying? You're saying like,
yes.
oh, I want to take a potato and put it in the forest and do a stop action of how it disintegrates in forest or something like that. Like weird people come
I
out.
mean, that's what the fund person told me.
Yeah.
Like, there was a person, I can't remember whether it was a potato, but she definitely sort of alluded to the fact that a lot of people have sort of viewed this as a multimedia art piece, which can be experimental film as well. But she was like, I would like it for it to be recorded so that it could be viewed at a later
Yeah.
time and not as a
That
part
would
of
be the
this
definition
like
of a
art
film, I
installation.
think.
Yeah, I think so. And she was like, well, you would think, but not really. But anyway, we go to this like committee meeting, and one of the things that they talk to us about is this idea that film isn't like the suffering artist stereotype. And I was like, well, it's not really necessary as a human to suffer this much for your art that you as yourself disintegrate and your own mental health completely deteriorates. And they basically started laughing. They literally thought that I was making a joke because they clearly had like this whole view of like, oh no, art is life and you suffer for your art. Listen, I am fully in this career path as a filmmaker. However, I have struggled this much with my mental health, besides the fact that I'm a filmmaker, that if I self impose more expectation on myself from a filmmaking perspective, there's nothing going to be left of me as a human being. So I feel like this stereotype of the suffering artist, I also mentioned this on our podcast, Emma, when we did the interview, is just, it's something that I'm so against now, because how many brilliant minds have we lost to depression, suicide, addiction, I don't know, horrible anxieties or psychosis, whatever it was, who make these great, beautiful masterpieces. And then because they haven't been taking care of themselves, die. That's a very, very grim way of looking at it. But I've been reading a lot about art and filmmaking and all that sort of history and mental health, and it's nuts. I don't like it. I don't like that people put like art on this sort of pedestal as an excuse to not actually look at what's wrong in their life, or not even wrong, but what could be better, and just ignoring it because they're an artist. Shut up, you're boring. People have done that already. People have like cut off ears. You're not going to cut off your ear, then don't talk to me. Sorry. Anyway.
Yeah, I guess there is a glorification of the suffering of an artist, and in the society that is accepted, and also again pointing to our previous topic about female and men representation in the film industry. Usually, those suffering artists are men, and they are really geniuses because they are suffering, but also they're making good art. So that is also something that I'm really finding. I hope it's gonna change, because I find it's a really old stereotype. That's also like a society that like, if I am a man genius, I'm an artist, then all the society needs to take care of me so that I can be in peace and make my art.
Yeah. Well, that's the point, is that only if the art is good, or if it's generally accepted, does your suffering make sense, and does anyone care about the suffering? And
yeah. What about the suffering of the artists that are shit?
yeah.
What about the suffering of the people that want to be artists, but then burn themselves out with all of this suffering, and then never actually get to the stage where they're good? Because that's the majority. Because everybody's going to suck when they're first learning something. If you have bad mental health, then regardless of what you try, you're going to have bad mental health unless you work at it. You know?
Yeah.
So that was just really like, at this like application meeting, it was very like big for me, because I was hoping that mental health as a topic was seeping into more of Estonian society and also in these circles, but there's a bit of a way to go. This is not in a slight to the people that were at the committee meeting. I actually thought that they took us very seriously, and they were very like, they wanted to prod into the project, and we're bringing us new ideas and new ways of looking at things. Some of the things I'm going to take to heart. Some of the things that they said I am not. And that's just how every committee meeting, I guess, generally can go. That was my view of it anyway. I was very surprised that they mostly prodded into the direction, like the artistic direction of the project rather than the financial side. They were very impressed with the fact that we had like New York connections, and we thought about like the plan for how to distribute the film.
Oh, they liked that, because that felt like we were like
They
sucking it
very
out of
much like that.
Is that something that you say in English? I don't know. Sucking something out of your
What?
pinky? I think
No,
that's a Czech
that
thing.
is not. I feel like you should take that again. I feel like a lot of people can take that in a very interesting
you'd
way.
get what I mean. Like, it felt like we're just kind of like trying to make that work, but like it wasn't made up, but it was just like kind of and we didn't even say that we got all these letters from people. We got letters from the composer and the lyricist of the sentiment, the piece that we were gonna make into a film. That was the basis for the film, and then also from Bar Opera and Malena Dayan, of course. So it's nice that they were impressed with that. See, that in the Czech Republic, like, I have to say, I am just impressed with the openness of the Estonians, at least that committee, at least this experimental film fund. The fact that they wrote like a really thoughtful letter afterwards about why they weren't
Hmm.
funding it. And I guess this is spoiler alert. So yeah, we didn't get the money
Yeah,
after all
we
this.
didn't get the money.
We should have built up to
There
that.
is no money.
There is
We
zero
should have
money.
built
We
up
are
to
just
that, but
here
I
from
guess we
our
did.
free time.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that is more, I could not expect that from a Czech film fund.
Yeah, I've been analyzing this like committee meeting in my head a lot, and I think the end of why they didn't fund it was, feel free to disagree with me on this, Eva, but it felt like they didn't think it was enough of an experimental
Yeah.
film project.
Can we
They
just
were like,
read the
this is a,
translation that you sent me of their letter? Could we just read that out loud?
I don't think we can. I don't think we can. I think that's confidential.
I don't think it's a public
Ah, okay,
document.
so you're
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
allowed to read it out loud. Okay. But we
yeah,
can
we can
paraphrase it.
paraphrase.
Okay. I mean, it was a translation
So
of
I
it.
would
But
So,
say,
I think there was one of the elements was that you know we took the existing opera libretto, and
was
maybe
not
they would have been more inclined to fund us when we had like an original
our own.
script.
Yeah.
I think they were also asking about it on the meeting at the meeting, and they were like asking like, would you change the script, or they were like commenting on uh, how they would like to see the script a little bit more developed.
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
And we were basically answering that yes, that would be nice, but we actually have the original
Yeah.
libretto that we're deriving it from. And I think that was one of the things, and the other was also I guess yeah, they just wanted to see maybe something extra
mhm,
for the
Yeah.
experimental film funding. But we would yeah, I don't know. I think for me as a producer, I think it's still a very strong project
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
because we have so many elements, like what all the things that we talked about, like all the uh, production partners and all distribution partners and all that, and also the artistic side,
Mm-hmm.
and also a little spoiler alert, but the Estonian Film Fund, they did advise us to submit the project again
Mm-hmm. I didn't know
Mhm.
that.
to the new short film funding
Mm.
round.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I didn't know
we
that.
have
That's news to me.
generally,
Yeah.
yeah, it is. Well, because we were debating it of whether we would do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we kind of said that if this experimental film fund doesn't necessarily work out, then we would put it to bed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we do have all of the materials together
Yeah.
now. However, the short film fund is literally Hunger Games.
Yeah.
I know I've said that, but it is every single short film project that every single Estonian
Mm-hmm.
filmmaker has in the year of 2023
Mm-hmm.
is competing for the same amount of things.
Yeah.
So the experimental film thing, it sort of worked for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that however, like how Echo would be able to live
Mm-hmm.
again after being in a slight slumber is if we found a musical short film fund. Because the experimental thing, I even agree with them that it's
Yeah.
not that much of an experiment. We're just creating a really good operatic short film, you
Yeah.
know? And that could be a musical film.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, that could absolutely be a musical film. Currently, a sort of a fund does not exist
Yeah.
that in Estonia that funds any kind of like musical projects, including music
Yeah.
videos, for example. There's no specialized fund like that
Mm-hmm.
because also probably it doesn't come up as much.
Yeah.
We don't have a big musical culture here. I
Mm-hmm.
would say, like in the UK, there's a huge musical
Yeah.
culture. But anyway, I'm guessing some European Union call for a short musical film
Yeah.
would have to come up, which is very rare.
Yeah. It's
But even if in 2-3 years it
right.
comes up, I feel like we can dig up
Yeah.
all of the materials, translate them into English real quick,
Yeah.
and then like
Yeah. True.
go there.
Mhm.
It's so interesting how like kind of weirdly stuck in the middle this project is. It's like a
It
study
really
in
is.
how like you do have to fit into slots and those slots are
Yeah.
constantly shifting. And a lot of the slots only come up every couple years. And it's like, it's just because it's not, you're right, it's not true, it's not really experimental. You can sell it as experimental, but it's not that experimental. It's not, I mean, as a short film, it's also too experimental in the sense that everyone is singing
Yeah.
and it's based on a pre-existing like piece of music.
Hmm.
So it really only fits into musical short film, and those are being made even with quite big budgets. I mean, there's a 20-minute film. I don't remember the name now, but I sent this to you at some point. There's a 20
Yeah.
minute film that combines Mozart's Alleluia with a new composition. And the reason it
Hmm.
got funded, and there's other examples of this. I mean, there, Opera Philadelphia and other places are now trying to produce this kind of content. Actually, the problem is that the only people who really get to make in, because we wrote to Opera Phil, and I was told that I should write to Dallas Opera and Opera Philadelphia, to their streaming platforms, to ask if maybe they would be interested in producing, because this Experiments in Opera did a 10-part series, a 10-part like TV opera, and they got funded, I think partially by Opera Philadelphia, and then also All Arts, and then another streaming platform. But they didn't even respond, because it's such, like, classical music is such an insider game. It just is.
Mm.
So the people, so there's people, my equivalents, who have agents and who are at these big opera houses, who have
Hmm.
these ideas, and they are able to produce them because they already have the support of an institution and
Yeah.
of the industry. So someone like that's totally from the outside. And there's an insider aspect to film as well.
Oh yeah.
But I mean,
Mm.
it just seems a little bit more, maybe because it's more of a current art form, it just seems a little bit more open, to collaboration from the outside. But maybe that's just me
Yeah.
feeling the grass is greener on the other side. I don't know.
No, no, I mean, I think you're right. I think that we are sort of examples of that, where I went a very traditional filmmaking route in terms of going to film school, doing an audiovisual media BA, and then specializing in a screenwriting master's degree. And now have, like, I followed the path pretty directly as to how you do it. Eva went a completely different direction in terms of her education, and we're now in a place where we're in a fairly, I would say, similar point in our careers where we can collaborate, and it's a very sort of equal playing field, because in terms of the industry, we're in quite like similar places where we like to work with each other, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess filmmaking is a little bit more open to people with different paths, and the passion and the know-how and the sort of
Mm-hmm.
readiness to go for it is a very, very big factor. I can't imagine somebody having zero operatic training and then applying to an opera theater and then being like, I have practiced at home
No.
for 10 years, and I have also like done musical theater, even
Mm-hmm.
musical theater productions and all of that stuff, regardless of whether they're a
Yeah.
beautiful singer or no.
I could see an opera director maybe coming
Yeah.
totally from the outside, but
Hmm.
everyone, like, when that happens, it's a big time director from the film. Like, sometimes they have even tried to get like big time theater and film directors into opera to make it like more modern or something. And usually what happens, I mean, they do it, but first of all, they already are successful within their own field. But secondly, then there's always like battles with the orchestra and the singers. Not always. I shouldn't say always, but there's this weird thing where, like, the people who are the masters of the music are against the people who are, doing the director stuff. And there's this weird kind of tension in opera where there's a whole group of people who are saying opera is being destroyed by modern directing. But anyway, that's what I'm working here in Lyon on, trying to shatter opera stereotypes and stuff. And actually, the whole project was an it was trying to deal with the absurdity of classical singing in a 21st century
Yeah.
context, because the technology of classical singing, I have spent since my mid-teens until now, like half my life, I've spent honing something which primarily works to amplify the voice without microphones. That's what it is made to do. Which, when I say it that way, like, that's absurd, right? Like, it's
Hmm.
absurd. It's like, it's good to know that there's beauty to it, and there's other aspects to classical singing which don't have to do with that, like the extending of the range and hiding the breaks in the voice, so that it's a smooth kind of instrumental sound, so that you can focus on the music as opposed to the voice, let's say. But classical singers learn only that, and then they're not able to do the other stuff. like change, use different registers in different parts of their voice, and they're not able, and only like specialists, like weirdos on the outskirts who are specialists in new music can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, and if you want to study vocal art on the college level and deeply study music, you're obliged to learn lyric singing, operatic singing, which is
Yeah.
absurd. I mean, the only other thing you could do maybe is jazz singing and musical theater, but both of those are kind of contained within a certain, are still too contained. Like basically you're
Yeah.
learning styles and not singing, not use of the voice,
Yeah, I mean, coming from a much lesser but still musical
Yeah,
theater
you have that
background,
background.
yeah, musical theater is evolving so quickly, and I think that the vocal teachers and the sort of schools are picking up steam and being like, "Hey, we need to do this." I feel like a lot of, for example, like Lin-Manuel Miranda stuff, eh, from like In the Heights era to Hamilton, obviously, has really revolutionized the way musical theater makers view academy and view this process of learning, because you're not doing like the traditional stuff anymore. Like on a first year musical theater level, you're going, all right, here are the types of musical theater, here are all the things that you will need to basically have a very good grasp of if you can have a chance of making it in this industry. I'm coming from a UK like university background because I went there for a year, and that was mainly the thing. We were doing like a very, very sort of advanced level of musical theater history, and then in our vocal classes we're like, all right, remember all of those eras that you studied, all right, let's learn how to sing in all of those different ways. And that included classical,
Yeah.
that included operatic style. So it's really, really interesting how we have different views on all of these things. And it's really interesting how nobody really said opera short film. It was always referred to as a musical short film.
Yeah.
So it's not musical theater short film necessarily, but because they had Les Mis and I don't know, all of the Disney live musicals and all of that stuff as a reference point, it was way immediately put more into that category because operatic like film isn't as widely known.
Yeah.
I think.
Which is part of the experiment, actually. It was part of like
Yeah.
what we were trying to explore. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a more hopeful ending actually than I thought, because I really thought that we had to put this project to bed or rethink it, like do it without the original concept, like just totally revamp it, because which would be really freeing. But yeah, but that's something to talk about in private.
Yeah. Now let's
yeah,
have a 6-hour brainstorming session about how
for
to
sure.
write a new opera short film from scratch. Let's do that.
Yeah. Look, composers need work. Juliana Hall also needs work, but she has already written the piece, so we need to create new work, perhaps. Although I liked that was part of the experiment, was can you take a modern piece of music and make something totally different out of it? And this was such a blank canvas in terms of, we didn't really talk about the nitty gritty of that, but we don't need to. It was just that piece for unaccompanied soprano, which is already pretty unique. It's only a 20th and 21st century phenomenon to have a classically trained voice that's unaccompanied. And then the text was just the singer going through different emotions and addressing the audience. And it was just like, it was in a way, it felt like incomplete. Like there was something that could be done with it. And so I felt, oh, this is an interesting blank canvas with which to explore this idea. And I was at that time, I was being inundated with all these like Zoom operas that were done on the fly and stuff. And I was like, okay, surely there can be an actual collaboration here between filmmakers and opera singers. Okay, any final thoughts? Anything we didn't discuss?
I think there still can be a collaboration, but if somebody out there knows of a musical short film fund that an Estonian producer, Estonian writer, director, and a Czech American opera singer can apply to, let us know. We'll put our contacts.
Yeah, that's a
down
good
at the
idea.
bottom.
That's a good idea. Let's
Maybe
put
they'll open it just
info
for
out
us.
there. Yes.
Maybe someone will watch this and be inspired to create
I
it.
think yeah, if there is a private investor interested, I
Yes.
think
Oh my
we
God,
would
I
say
forgot
no.
about how I paid $60 to
Oh
be
my
able to have access. I forgot about that whole
What?
screw up. Did you know this, Eve?
I don't
So
know.
right before, as we were putting together the okay, final indictment of the system, okay,
This is good.
um,
This is good
as
stuff.
I was as we were putting together the application, we were like, Vivian asked me, are there any like funds in the U.S. that we could at least say that we're going to apply to? And I think Malena had told us about this database that exists where you pay something to have access to this database. And when
Yeah, and
she
she was
had
like, it's
used
like
it,
$10 or something.
yeah, it's just like it's
Yeah.
$20, you get it full access.
Yeah.
So I go on there, and the lowest that you can pay is $66 for a month of access.
Yeah.
It's billed like monthly automatically, so I had to be like really careful to like
Yeah.
unsubscribe right before. But that $66 only gave me access to like a really bare bones database of just like people who
Names.
fund, like
Yeah.
like organizations and individuals who fund, many of whom were only by private invitation. So there was no contact for them. There was no way to contact them. So all these rich families in the US who are funding things who would actually be, possible total, because like 60,000 euros is very little for someone who is rich. It's it's
It
hard
is.
to conceptualize this for me, but it's actually
Very
very
much
little
blows
for
my
rich
mind.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, but you can't contact them. Like there's no way to contact them. And then if I had paid like $100 or something, I would
Yeah.
have gotten an access to that and a database that shows the current like actual calls for applications. That said, when I looked through all of what was coming up for people who fund arts, because there just really wasn't a lot, because this was like a general database for everyone who's doing funding, and I understand this logically. Most of them are interested in like new ecological solutions, business training for people, for like more kind of practical stuff. Very few of them are arts based. And yeah, I mean the ones who are just didn't really fit what we were doing, because it was like
Yeah.
often like, oh, arts education or outreach programs or this kind of thing. And I totally understand why they do this, but like $100 really, like,
Yeah. The
it's
US
just
is broken.
so that was a whole
Broken.
escapade. I do know someone
Yeah.
like I know someone who funded their short film just by knowing, like, contacting someone who had money and being able to convince them to give money to their project, and but that's like such a long shot. And how do you know that, and this is my boyfriend actually, and he's someone who knows everyone, is really socially like competent and like
Yeah.
really outgoing socially, and that's just like not for everyone. And you have to, and you also just have to have a project which happens to click with that person at that time.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
this is
closing
sort
thoughts.
of
Emma, you should just get really famous really quickly. If you could like
and
start a
rich.
TikTok and like really put yourself out there, sing at Carnegie Hall a couple times. Eva and I will come through. You can fly us through the Carnegie Hall, and then we'll come in with like baskets. You know how they do in like Catholic churches or something? We'll just come in with baskets, and then
Sounds
you
good.
can sign
Sounds
the
good.
check to cash. I've seen people do that in American movies. We'll find a way to cash it,
In American
and then
movies.
and then we'll be on our way. You know,
Yeah, it's so simple, really.
I'll
It's
wear
very
a little
simple.
bow tie. I'll wear a suit and a bow tie. I'll fit into the Carnegie Hall vibe. It's gonna be good. I say that's our main way forward.
Sounds
Yeah.
like a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the opera folks really want to glorify opera, and this is kind of like somewhere between. And so it's just between. It's a project that is between on so many things. But I think
God,
that's
yeah.
what makes it really beautiful and really interesting. And I hope we can find like something that we fit in eventually.
Yes. I
Okay.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. Just thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for talking to me, and I look forward to our brainstorming discussions in the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It was so nice to be here.
So beautiful.